bring back a friend of the program, somebody who learned to be himself on the bandstand and in life. Jeff Berlin, welcome back to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Hello, Jay. How are you? Can you hear me okay?
You sound good, brother.
I'm glad. Thank you for having me back.
It's an honor. I wanted to read you. Did you ever play with Mel Martin before?
No, I don't. Well, it's possible. I had, I run across people at times on gigs, so it's possible. I don't recall the name.
Are you familiar with that cat or no?
No, not at this moment.
He was a West Coast guy. Played a lot with Azteca, which was a great band with Lenny White, and it also played with a lot of bebop and a badass, Eddie Marshall, and all those West Coast cats. So in our interview, he told me this story, and I wanted you to respond to it. He said,
Sure.
He's a tenor player. He said, Billy Hart, who played with both Stan Getz and Joe Henderson, would say Stan had a much bigger sound than Joe. He did. He could play acoustic and fill the room. That's one of the things he pointed out to me that he learned early on is fill every nook and cranny of the room with his sound. Not just the edge of the sound, not just the projection of the sound, but the literal resonance of the sound throughout the room. That's an old school magic trick that most people never get to. It's metaphysical. And he talks about seeing Les Brown's band, and he had a guy named Freddie Waters, and he could, in an acoustic setting, he could fill the room with his entire metaphysical sound. And I know, your early career, you were still playing on antiquated PAs. You didn't have everything dialed in all the time. I just kind of wanted you to talk about how you learned to expand your sound through soul and physicality and not using the technology.
Well, soul and physicality are developed. It's not something that one, let's say, puts on the schedule to achieve. Well, you could be conscious of it, but my sound was, in my opinion, not very good for a very long time. And I would say the painful regard of it got me to investigate and try to do something different. So at this point in my life, I'm convinced that my bass tone has never been better. It's an evolution, and evolution it takes its own course. So the idea about one person filling a room or another person not filling a room, with respect, I don't think it's worth worrying about. We have technology today, and we have acoustical regard where a person with their particular playing tone, thin, thick, whatever it might be, uses that because that's what they do. And so they'll certainly be heard to the end of the room, whether or not they may have a thicker tone like a Stan Getz. It really doesn't really matter. Do you?
But I do, just thinking about it, I'm in awe of these cats. And Stan was, all the masters could do that. They were able to project just one of the aspects of it. But you talked about not being happy with your sound early on in your career. Was that just listening back to it, or you in the moment were you insecure about your sound? And how did you cultivate getting to where you are today?
Well, I would listen back, and there's things that are terribly difficult to hear. You see, I am convinced that my reputation was well undeserved at the beginning of my career, but realized that at the time there were only 2 or 3 other guys with technique. So in my sort of new found a reputation, and that there wasn't really much to go on, I overplayed, and I played doing things that I thought would bring me respect, and it counted with me more than the music might have. I wanted to be loved. Pre-therapy, So,
man, that's all I want to do is be loved, man.
Well, yeah, and
that's an impossible task. So,
well, it's not a wise path to tread, because some will love you and some won't. So you know that, and I would say everybody does. Just that in that particular time and in the ensuing years, I sort of inched along painfully and was pretty honest with myself. So I would do things in my playing to change it, and I'm still doing it. I practice quite a bit these days, different kind of musics, because while I got used to some of the things I do, I can hear the gaps in what I do, and I want to do it better. So even at my, vast ancient age, I'm still dedicated to that. So yeah, in my early years, my playing tone was thin, it was crunchy. These days, it's vastly different, and quite frankly, I think it's far more akin to a warmer, broad, round kind of a bell, kind of bong, kind of bass tone, which truly is where I seem to be at this juncture.
How did you handle your peers at that time when your sound was crunchy? I mean, did you project your insecurities on them, or were you basically saying, I got to man up, I got to I mean, to me, like, we all are young and dumb. I mean, even at 46, I'm still fucking up every day. And it's like, I just wonder how you came to peace with yourself as a human being, because like you said, there's only, you're on the bandstand 2 hours a night, and the rest of the time you got to live with yourself,
Therapy, deep inner regard. And it wasn't easy. I discovered that if I could regard my music honestly, possibly I can regard myself honestly. So I went to therapy on and off for many years until I stumbled upon a person who might be there's two of them, but the first one changed my life to where I became another person, in that I cleaned my attic. And then and that was in Florida, and then when I got to Nashville, I felt a need to continue, and I found somebody who coincidentally was in line with the first person who raised me up. So it was the header off the cliff into me and into the truth and reality of all the things, not in regards to what people thought or what this and that. I wanted to know why I was uncomfortable, why I was unhappy, why I felt discombobulated. I felt like if our late friend Jaco Pastorius might have gone to therapy, because most of the time it isn't chemical, but I mean, I can't say for him, but a lot of us have issues, and the issues are well hidden. I didn't wish to hide from them. And I'll tell you, man, by going through it, so you asked, how did I find this? Because I said, come on, angst, come on, anxiety. And it came, and it put me through a loop, but it went away, and that's how it generally is. In fact, in spiritual, I won't go on long, but in spiritual terms, some of the philosophies of spiritual growth is to expect and even thank suffering for coming into your day.
Absolutely.
So
an optimist is somebody who can look at the bright side when they've been given a raw deal in life.
Interesting, sure.
And it's like, but that's all people's perception or perspective. And as far as I'm concerned, people that are dealing with psychological issues, it's unfortunate that there's still a stigma to it, because I think it would be very cathartic for a lot of people. But you have to lean into it. Some stuff that's revealed is disturbing. I just wonder what you did. What's the formative thing you can say that you took from therapy and was able to put it into your practice of your life and music?
Well, I would say one core point of cognition that came to me was the realization that if I feel bad, I don't make an effort to feel good. And what that means is that if something is negative or something is difficult, I recognize it and I see it. And that is the acceptance of today or this week, this isn't going so well for me. Mm-hmm. Look at that, there it is. And often, and reasonably, we want to change it. I don't want to feel bad, I want to feel good. But what I got out of a lot of this, and there's a book called, give me a second. I have it inside. It's almost like Life is Hard or I could tell you if you want me to go look, but essentially what it says is when things get rough, just look at it and see it. Right. And recognize it. That's it. I mean, it's almost like nothing.
Right. You cannot project or like almost just be in the now, learn to sit in the mess, you know?
In a way, yeah. I mean, just to recognize it, because sometimes if we can't change it, it can be very frightening. I mean, that's what anxiety is. Something's wrong.
That's
and
right.
I cannot fix it.
No, I dig. I mean, can I be clear? Did you know Will Lee in Florida? Or I'm just curious about were you living in Florida?
I lived in Florida, but I only knew Will in New York. And this was during the 70s, and he was already a star on the New York studio and sideman scene.
You were so you were in New York as well at that time?
Yeah, I was in the city.
Was there a loft scene that you were checking out? I remember Sco talking a lot about there was a club Lower East Side. I gotta bring it up here. I'm just wondering about not that you needed to, but just the creative spots in the late 70s, because obviously there was a thriving loft scene, in the Flower District. That was where the Thelonious Monk Big Band would play, and that's Chuck Israels and Steve Swallow. That goes back to the 60s. I'm just curious about that loft scene, if you were part of that.
I was, not heavily, but I was. The good news for me is that while I could move my fingers quickly, I wasn't legitimately a good jazz player, a good Latin player, but I tended to learn quickly. I tended to pay attention. I have a quick story for you. Actually, it was a rehearsal. I played with Ray Barretto, who was pretty much the salsa. One of the superstars of salsa.
Yeah, totally.
So we played, and we were playing legitimate salsa music, and I couldn't. And the horn players were not happy. In fact, they were practically threatening to kick my ass. This motherfucker, I know you can't play shit. And I was pretty shaken up because these guys were furious, and it taught me a couple of lessons. One, I had to learn how to play salsa, and two, a lot of guys take the music as a sacred event, and these were the lessons of New York for me, or some of them. I had many. So I went out and bought several records of the traditional salsa music, and I spent about 2 weeks. I almost quit the band out of fear. But I said, no, I'm gonna learn this music. And so for a week, these guys were kind of pushing me around a little bit, and they were not pleased. And finally, one day, I did come in and played the music as legitimately as possible. And I saw them smile and look at me and go, "Yeah, man, that sounds really good, man. Yeah, now you're playing the shit." And it was a life lesson. Do you remember a club named Minton's? I think it was uptown, 125th Street.
I mean, I definitely know. I mean, that club was historic. I mean, that was in the thriving days of Harlem. I've heard of it. Never got to go there though.
Well, there were stories related to Minton's that when a lot of the guys got finished with 52nd Street, which was the jazz sort of entertainment center in the city where people used to go. A lot of these guys went uptown to play for dead serious reasons. They wanted to play. And occasionally people would come up, and these are the stories that some of the guys in the 70s told me, a couple of guys, I guess, and that they would sit in and didn't sound good and never should have tried to sit in with these masters of music, to where sometimes they would be beaten up for it.
No way, dude.
So like audience members who didn't want their art that they came for to be compromised. And I mean, they're extreme stories, you know what I mean? But in the learning process, we all must accept that we're going to suck as a right and as a prediction. We are all going to be bad. My tone is going to be bad. My bass playing is going to be overplaying, playing too many notes. I'm going to do all of the things that I would imagine one oughtn't do if I don't know what the right thing is. And through the process, I emerged and felt better, healed in my music to assume the responsibility of playing awfully, horribly, badly, and learn from that. And hopefully my career wouldn't have been compromised because of it. And I'm lucky it wasn't. But this is sort of a message of need, which is one reason why, and you know, we chatted a little bit about it. I greatly dislike bass education for that reason. I won't go into it deeply, but you can't make the way smooth when the way to playing is to go through the minefield. You have to. You got to walk on the rocks. Or a horn or sax or piano. We have to rough it in order to emerge in a higher area. So there you go. That's my little dissertation.
I want you to talk, this is profound. Never once did you ever consider walking away after Barretto's cats almost killed you. It was, you know, the reality is that, you know, you decided to lean into that and take it on as a challenge. And I wanted you to talk about, you said obviously they were just pissed in general, but the sacred quality of music. I mean, as a patron, I mean, I play congas with my friends, but I don't get on the bandstand. My friends are the real musicians. I'm just a journalist. But when I go as a patron, I am bringing a voltage to the bandstand, the sacred voltage from the audience, which allows the collective consciousness to be raised. And so I want you to talk about what these cats meant in terms of a sacred, you were talking about like a spiritual discharge of sorts.
Oh, yeah.
And so that's not something that you can, that's not technique based. You already had that in your reservoir.
I did. Well, it's sort of a conclusion that I arrived to because a lot of guys were clear in the serious meaning of playing in New York. And I kind of was, kind of wasn't. I'm kind of lucky. I was born a good musician, natural musician. I studied violin for years. I went to Berkeley for a couple of semesters. I played with the best guys, and everybody always sort of lauded me. So I went to New York with this on me. I'm great. I mean, you know. And I discovered a lot of reality there. And it can scare you off, but I'm fortunate in that I loved music and wanted it more than surrender to the possibility that I couldn't play well. So I tolerated it. It's just my particular construction as a human being. It's what sent me into therapy because I knew that I had bad thoughts sometimes in therapy. When I say bad thoughts, I mean bad thoughts. I couldn't go through with it because I was a coward. I'm not going to, follow through and end my life or whatever. But when I felt there was no way out of the emotions that I was feeling and the stress, but I can't go there. I said, I'm going to ride this train. And I'm no martyr, but I'm going to ride this train. I'm going to ride it wherever it ends up, it ends up. And I went through absolute murder. And I went through a little bit of murder in this city. Pre-therapy, people didn't like my attitude, and I agree with them. So there was a great upheaval in me, and I needed to attend to it. And my luck was I attended to it, I feel, quite well. I'm 72, and whatever years I have left, 10 years, 10 minutes, whatever it is, I'm sitting pretty. And it's all because... Huh?
I love it.
Yeah, but this is sort of the same element of music that I sort of get into, is that, or certainly in the education or in the artfulness of it, that we gotta walk down a bumpy path. I just can't think of a project or a sport or a philosophy or a job or a vocation or anything in life where one doesn't have to suck and really struggle with that to emerge afterward. And then
Berlin, you know what? I just want to say that it was a perfect balance of, I mean, dude, you go back to original Berkeley cats. I just did a 2-hour interview with a 93-year-old Jack Peterson. Does that name ring a bell?
Yeah, it very much does.
Jack Peterson was discovered at a Stan Kenton music camp in Indiana by the head of Berkeley at that time in '62. Right. And they asked him to develop a guitar curriculum for a jazz program. It had never been done, okay? There was no codification. There wasn't anything about the guitar. And so he had to develop, I'll send you the interview because it's somewhat profound. He is still so tapped in at 93. And here he is in '62 with John Abercrombie and Mick Goodrick. And basically, and he was there with John LaPorta, Ray Santisi, Herb Pomeroy, and there was very little literature on there. No one was writing books. 3 schools had jazz programs: Westlake in LA, North Texas, where my man Jack Peterson is from, and Berkeley. So he talked a lot about large ensembles of guitar players playing and like he got up to 12. Like he was just riffing off of each other. And LaPorta would refer to certain sets of notes to play, but there was no labels. There was no label for the music. And I just wonder if Jeff Berlin started a program, would you use any terminology to describe the music, or would it be merely, like, to me, like there is no roadmap anymore. The issue here is that the academy is the employer. The reason that what you're talking about, the reason that doesn't exist, there is no touring circuit. There's no live gigs. There's no opportunity to get your ass kicked.
Yeah, it's a lamentable thing, but to mention one thing, Herb Pomeroy, Ray Santisi, and John LaPorta were all teachers of mine when I went to Berkeley.
That's so beautiful. Okay, so please break that down. And do you think that they would, not that it matters, but what would they think of jazz music education today?
I imagine that jazz education tends to stay the same in that it tends to regard jazz literature and jazz academic principles as the same. What I think they would be shocked at is how, and again, this is definitely not popular principles, but just how Berkeley, and this is my opinion, I'm not trying to cause harm, and I always have to do this little preamble.
Yeah, I don't like the preface, dude. It doesn't make any sense. You own it. Who cares?
Well, I agree, but my interest isn't to cause harm. It's to cause awareness. That's
absolutely. So yeah, what is, make us aware?
Okay, that Berkeley has greatly veered from the principles of a narrow education in music to where it sort of seems to have adopted the original MI concept of a vocation. That is, even I believe in its mission statement, its first declaration is to help students to have a career. And the problem with this declaration and philosophy is that you can't prepare students for a career because a career isn't predictable. The way a person is prepared for a career is by being taught how to play, exclusively taught how to play. What I've discovered in Berkeley, especially Berkeley bass department, is that it has become so broad and so non-music centric, where there is no core curriculum written under the auspices of the bass chairman I think he's been around for Mr. Bailey. He's been there for a decade or more. And there isn't a core music curriculum at the school. There's an emphasis on groove. There's an emphasis on performance. Having teachers that don't know music, literally, who are teaching there is sort of an anathema to the concept of what college music education is. So I said these things.
Right.
I am a fan of the playing of Victor Wooten. I'm a fan of the playing of Steve because he developed the harp. I'm a fan of the musicians that have ply their trade in their art. Where I feel that there's a problem in the Berkeley principle is having, let's say, Mr. Wooten teach in there. He doesn't know about music to teach it. He can play the bass, but I can't see where groove, which doesn't belong in bass education in the first place, is being emphasized. Clinics, webinars, where no music is taught, webinars, well, the gathering of guest bassists is entire.
Well, I want to be clear, though.
Sure.
It's not music-centric, and you believe that everybody should have their own internal groove to life. You don't need to have a class about that.
I don't think that it needs to be emphasized or taught. I
Why?
think the idea about groove is that it doesn't belong in an educational thing. So
Why,
the reason
Why?
that I had mentioned these two gentlemen is because absolutely everything today in bass education or in music education can be drawn straight back to the 1990s, etc., where these principles and lessons were taught. People embrace them. And I'm sharing in the, not in the artful sense or the personal sense, but I can't find anybody, and this is sort of where I'm ostracized from bass. I'm ostracized for questioning, let's say, the educational acumen of a guy who is so highly regarded as Victor, but I can't find one guy who states how they got better by any lesson that he taught. So I would.
Well, here's the bottom line. Most cats, this is not a personal attack. It's just most cats know you're right, but music is the significance of music, the significance of sound has changed in our culture. It no longer dictates our culture. Therefore, you need it as a career. So it's got to be slick. And it's just going to be very inauthentic. And therefore, that's what gets paid. That's what sells today. That's the time we're living in, as opposed to, like, going back to Peterson. I mean, he had to go to get the Harvard musical textbook of terminology and go back. He was writing. He was hanging with his students, going to clubs. He was going and be sitting with Alan Dawson. But the idea of groove, Alan Dawson was like, hey, if you can sing it, and the drums, if you can sing it, you can play it. And I know you sing and you can play it. And that's about big ears. So it's kind of like you have a class on groove. And I think that's one reason. I will tell you this. The real deal, I live in Tucson. We actually have the Tucson Jazz Institute, which is incredible. It's very unique to anything in the country.
Bravo.
We have pretty good, the academy's the academy. The cats that teach there are great players, but they're hemmed in by I don't want to speak to that. But then we have a great jazz club here called the Century Room. And there's one cat in particular, I'm thinking of, bass player, Patrick Morris, and he dropped out of Berkeley. And so did my friend Ryan Wheelis, who's the sax player, and he dropped out. And they're in their 20s. And these are some of the most baddest, authentic dudes I have ever hung with, and they saw exactly what you saw. Well, he said, this is not the reason I got into music. Well, they came back, and they're playing their asses off, and they're getting $19,000 a year and starving to death.
Right. Yeah. Well, I think one of the elements that people, when I mention group classes, basically performance. There's a teacher, I'm trying to recall his name, but he made a statement. You can see it in the bass video on the bass page, the Berkeley bass page, and he says, I'm paraphrasing, when you play through your arm and then through the bass and then it goes into the listener, that's what it's all about. This is a school philosophy because it appears appears in the school website. But in base education, in all education, this is not what it's about. It isn't about trying to reach people in art. It's about being taught how music works and how to learn your instrument, hence the term college, hence the term a study. There is a great disconnect with Berkeley principles where performance seems to equal or supersede the learning. Learning is antithetical to performance because the goals are different.
Well, but Jeff, you're totally right. Music on a mass level, on a mainstream level, it is just a performance. It's not, it's formula trip. I mean, the other thing that they're hemmed in by, and this is just the greed factor and sort of the commodification of our country, but I mean, here's the bottom line. It's great that I hear what you're saying. College, you go to Oberlin, you got Eddie Henderson, you got Gary Bartz, you know that those cats are getting some serious street language. But in Boston, when you were there, outside of the academy, whatever that looked like, I mean, headphones were a new technology when you got there, or like
they were,
but it's like, at this point, it's like, you had the combat zone. You had the jazz workshop. Herb Pomeroy and Ray had their own clubs. There were so many clubs where it was like school was the least of your thoughts. I mean, it was great to get the lessons. You'd have a private lesson, and then you'd go and play 6 sets over the weekend in the combat zone and fucking get money and learn. That's where you really learn, and that does not exist. It's become a boutique. The venues are boutique. Either they price you out or they just don't get it. Anyway, I think what's missing in this part of your manifesto is just the realities of the fact that you could put all these kids in college and teach them music. Some of those do, but there's just no place for them to apprentice.
Well, with respect, there's no need for a college to be concerned with this. And in my view, that the nature of preparing for a career where basically few ever find it is a misnomer. Is that the right word? It is not fair to offer a career when a great number of grads won't acquire this. But here's the thing, a music school isn't responsible for the conditions of the music industry. And where I actually think that music schools that teach styles and teach contemporary, that is the systems and mode of operation of music and business today, are actually teaching students to be obsolete. Because check this out, I've thought this through a long time. A doctor is legally required to upgrade their knowledge of medicine. It's mandatory. When Berkeley or other schools teach what's going on in 2024, 25, and when 2027 and 28 roll around, the students that graduate in some cases might not be qualified to compete because the things they were taught became obsolete. Literally, the concept of teaching contemporary ideas seems to include the possibility of obsolescence, and not in the far future, because things are always changing. Now, I've got to say this, and it's an important thing. People say, well, the flaw, Jeff, in your view, is you're not including how music has changed. Music has moved on, and so what you're asking people to do to study music doesn't apply today. Now, if you go back in our country, back to the beginning of the 20th century, and take all the musicians that started back then right up until today, and go through all the styles, the 20s, the 30s of Louis Armstrong, the 40s of the big bands, the 50s of rock and roll, the early R&B, the 60s of rock of the Beatles, that period, the 70s of disco, the 80s of new wave, whatever it is, and you continue on, the one element that is constant since the beginning of 5-line staff music is that the notes in whatever style one is using or doing are the same notes. And a music school that does not understand that while styles change, but music itself does not, in my view, are doing an incredible disservice to the education of people and the message spreading that you can, if you mean it, it sounds good, and that there's no wrong notes. A terrible thing, not liking to practice, learning as a child, putting on blindfolds, everything related to the hands, everything related to names. I will say that there was an interesting, can I continue or am I talking too much?
No, man, it's cool. Go ahead.
There was an interesting Steve Bailey comment about me, and he said something where I think somebody may have asked him, this is a while ago, and I got wind of it. It was, I paid attention. They said, so what about Jeff? And he said, well, Jeff is not relevant anymore. So his views are not relevant. And that got me to thinking that this perfectly explained why name musicians are being used at Berkeley to teach, because it might be a reality that relevancy in the work area of music defines the Berkeley principle that these are the guys that can teach you how to play. So what didn't occur by saying that Jeff is irrelevant, I think he said I was irrelevant, and I'll accept it. I can accept irrelevancy. That's But the idea is that whether irrelevant or not, were there any flaws in my statements that only music ought to be taught, and only the regard of the instrument through musical principles for every single student ought to be attended to, and because I wasn't relevant, the concept is we don't really want to pay attention to Berlin because he isn't famous now. So that's why you'll find a lot of the people that teach at Berkeley, or the guest bassists, or whomever that they get. They had a clinic with Stanley Clark, Marcus Miller, and Victor Wooten. So I'm attentive to educational things, and I said, with respect, it's a hang. People are not going to learn how to play better from this. So if the idea is fun and entertainment at Berkeley, fair enough. Just make it clear, because people aren't going to learn from these clinics. They're question and answers, and really
well, what I'm saying is that the cats that I know, the two cats that are in their 20s, the ones that the kind of, I mean, part of it's also the musician. The musician has to get that too. They have to get it. If they don't,
that's up to them.
Well, no, I did. And so the cats that are really seeking are going to split, because they're going to know that. I mean, what happened in your education that is something that you think is completely missing today? And I'm talking at Berkeley. What is what focusing on a positive thing that you say is just not a priority? There's some music centric stuff at Berkeley.
Sure, there is. It's a music school.
So what is it? What is something that was so instrumental for you then that is missing now?
Well, in my opinion, the absolute regard of educational music for 100% of every bass player that attends the school, basically based upon the same curriculum. If you can't read, or if you can't read well, I feel you oughtn't be in a music college. It's college.
You think there are cats that after 4 years can't read?
I don't know. I've heard of stories like that. But that's rumor. So what do I know? But I know that from the broad perspective of teaching, the inclusion of classes teaching literally how to use a pick, classes teaching music of heavy metal of this type. I think they're private lessons. I don't know if it's mainstream Berkeley bass curriculum, but that the thing that's missing is that it doesn't seem to attend to the narrow and 100% regard in a music lesson of music like it used to be. That because the industry is so broad and has so many things going on with it, and this isn't just a Berkeley thing. I think it's a general worldwide thing.
I want to ask you that this is important. What was going
on
in the industry that allowed you to gain a foothold and make a career in music? When you were coming, what was the industry then? It was records, radio, studio work, and touring, right? I mean, what was the industry then?
Records, radio, touring, and studio. I went to New York and I was in the studio in 2 months.
Dude, by the way, I just want to say, since we last talked.
Yeah, hold on. I have an alarm going off here. I'm trying to shut it off. Go ahead. Say again.
Since we last talked, I connected with David Matthews, did a few interviews with him, and Shuggy Wanna Boogie, man. The tracks that you're on, do you remember that album?
I remember that. I remember Dave, and he was such a nice man. I'm not sure.
Some of the covers that you're on, he turned a lot of Just My Imagination. He turned a couple of those covers and did them inside out, and dude, they're ripping. And I guess that, I mean, the industry was simpler, and now you have, you had 6 seeds dropped when you were coming, and they all sprouted and germinated and grew. And now there's 37 seeds, and it's just a very uneven growth. And what they're saying is, because I interview with a lot of younger cats, is a music school today is going to prepare you for the 8 different hats that you have to wear in order to self-promote. You didn't need to self-promote, okay? You could play your instrument and express yourself and people would get it.
Right.
So, I mean, it's my also question is, are you your hardest critic on yourself?
Very much so, but
I don't think Ray Barretto in his right fucking mind would ever hire you for a gig if you weren't really good. But you just realized you had to shed really hard, which you did. Yeah.
I'm hard on myself, but if you go online, there's a lot of people that are harder. I mean, I'm pretty much standing alone for a principle of accomplishment. And I'm trying to do it on the behest of people, often the people that dislike me the most, that somebody has to, sorry, I need this opportunity here. I'm not trying to cause Berkeley harm. I'm not trying to cause Bailey or Wooten or anybody harm. I'm trying to point out that there are proven methodologies in music that have now been ignored in regards to teaching. I learned starting at 5. So, at 5 years old, I started violin. It gave me an advantage. So I'm not trying to cause harm. I'm trying to make people alert. And fortunately, there are people that do understand my point of view. That's why I'm an outsider. I'm an outsider because...
You're a rogue bassist.
I'm a rogue visionary.
Listen, man, I mean, come on, man. I just started this audio series of interviews I did when I was commissioned to do interviews on a Stan Getz documentary. And I talked to everybody from Lalo Schifrin to Huey Lewis to David Amram and Dave Holland and Jack D and all those cats. And I just unloaded this series on my YouTube channel, and it's really cut through the morass, because Stan, as you know, was a pop star as well. Really was remarkable. He was a pop star as a jazz musician with the girl.
Yeah, he was.
And so he generates, and the amount of flack that I get based on my style of interviewing, even though I'm pulling out great stuff, it's just what I'm trying to get at is, I mean, you're getting somewhere when you're not everybody's loving on you. And you appreciate those that get it. I mean, dude, I don't want everybody kissing my ass. If they are, they're, to me, it's like the amount of critique that people get on me, whether, about, the sort of amazingly improvisational nature of the interviews, sort of cutting off one direction, going in another, it bothers the shit out of people. And that's their problem and not your problem. And I would also recommend that you no longer preface any of your statements by saying, I'm not trying to. It doesn't matter anymore. Like, you have to, and the bottom line is, I guess the question is, how often are you able to Is there a way to express some of this inner urge that you have about this issue? How often are you able to express it through your apparatus to real human beings?
Oh, well, sometimes I'm online about it. I use the tools that are available to me, and I'm sort of I stuck myself up as a lighthouse when nobody wanted one. And so I do it online sometimes, but people are weary of it, and I get it. But
Well, I meant your bass. I meant going out and playing live, like actually just.
Oh, I play every year. I got you. I play every year.
Yeah.
I'm touring. It's also a bit of a. I have a new record coming out.
Beautiful.
And it's going to be a great one. And I practiced since 19. I practiced since 2023. Over 320 days a year. I mean, I really went into it, and my playing shows it. So, and I'm continuing in the practice. So I play, and I go out and do this. If I'm not playing, I'm recording. If I'm not recording, I'm practicing. I'm very good at accepting the world as it is and trying my best to help people to be guided well.
Absolutely. No, man, I'm the same. I'm a conduit at this point.
Yeah.
I was made for this time, and I think
Can I share a thought with you?
Please, man.
People that don't like what you say, and the reason I preface stuff
I also want to be clear. It's not so much with you. It's the fact that you are articulating a viewpoint that makes people uncomfortable. Whereas, like for me, it's my interviewing style. So it's two different things. But
the internet empowers everybody to be able to share a thought, whether or not one is qualified or has thought the thought through. The internet is the great presenter of I'm being gentle here, an occasional idiocy, whereby people that feel that they have an opinion or how they feel merits regard. So I don't go there. And I invite people, I tell people all the time, if you find anything flawed in my views, whatever it is, share what that is. Mm-hmm. Share where my lessons are flawed. Share where my principles are flawed. Mm-hmm. You're all invited to do so. And usually, the most that I'll get is that the metronome is a great thing, which I will disagree. But essentially, people don't address the principles that I share online, but will say, you're a fucking idiot. So when I get that a lot. Like I got that on Ed Friedland's page. I said something about time in a metronome, and 60 people told me to, do something to myself. And I took that evening and I went to each person and said, hi, Sam, can you share what I said that might have caused you to respond like this, or share where I'm flawed? And almost everybody was dead silent. Then occasionally a guy would respond. I say, I hear you, but I'll try this little exercise. Okay, thanks, Jeff. People don't ask questions. They jump to conclusions.
You nailed it, man. You nailed it. Because most of the time these cats are just wankers, and they'll delete the comment. I mean, Facebook does a good job. But the point is that I know who respects me. I know the elders respect me. I know my peers. It's like it's the peanut gallery. And I also think you're going to get a lot of knee-jerk reaction when you're doing listen, I don't understand why people, I guess it's just the conformist age, but people have conformed to receiving information instead of producing it. When you produce thoughts, I mean, for me, I don't want to transcribe my thoughts. I want to transcribe Berlin's thoughts. I want other people's opinions out there. So it's not about me. It's not really like me talking. I wouldn't really respect that. But I don't understand why people don't realize that this is not social media, that it's new media. It's an opportunity to drive collective consciousness. And for a journalist, it's essential in this time. And the idea that when you create controversy on new media, it's not the know-nothing bullshit.
No.
It's because you're actually doing something. The content is quality. And you're getting those responses, and you're vulnerable enough to, I mean, I used to get a lot of flack on Facebook too, but after a while, it's like people give up because you know what? They know your heart, your intention's in the right place. You're not here to pick fights with people. You're here to get people thinking, push them out of their comfort zone, and maybe change the trajectory of it all. And I respect that.
Well, I'm here. Thank you for that. I'm here to share thoughts that no teacher seems to share, but ought to.
They want to keep their job. They want to keep their job.
All right, fair enough. And I'll jump in and say, on the behest of the students, and I agree with you, because I've had several guys say, well, if I teach music, I've had this said to me, people won't come back to me. And my immediate thought was they oughtn't come back to you. They shouldn't go to hire somebody to do a job if they're not qualified. The internet right now proliferates with unqualified music teachers, to where I saw a guy say, hey, I'll organize your sites and get all your students in line, to help them organize it. The industry has become to where a guy like me offers a thought, and it's a shock, because I'm standing alone saying it's not going to get you to play better. That's all my point is. It's not going to get you to play better.
Right.
It's not going to get you to play
and
better.
You already answered your own question, because all those cats know that it's not about that anymore in order to make a living as a quote unquote musician.
Well, I hear you.
And that's a reality. So, Jeff, I got to deal with my younger daughter right now, but
sure, Jake.
You got to keep this going, man. You know what, man? I love being a disruptor. Like I said, man, I go to these spiritual events in music. I don't care if it's a jazz acoustic thing. Everything is a psychedelic experience, a rock show. And I want to push people out of their comfort zone so that they can grow. The musicians get it. The real musicians get it. And then at the end of the day, you're going to get flack because you're coming at things from a thoughtful perspective. You've thought a lot about this. You've written a lot about it.
Yeah.
Stay strong on your path, man. It's a good deal, man. I appreciate you as a disruptor, man.
Well, if music returns to the college level as an exclusive thing, I have nothing to disrupt and would be thrilled to join them.
Dude, I'm telling you, you're going to be looking down in your next life, and this will come to fruition. But you have to also accept the fact that the work you're doing now may never be revealed in this lifetime.
It's possible. I'm not looking for compensation or reward. I'm looking to share what I think is truth, so that the 5 guys on each continent that hear this might regard their financial situation and invest it in something that is going to get them to play their instrument.
I would do it as gracefully as possible, because what you're doing is transcending the cycle of birth and death. Because you're bringing information that's oftentimes misunderstood, only to be completely blossomed in a different life. And
possibly. I thank you for that.
Hey, man, it just came to me, man. So I'll talk to you soon, brother. Thank you so much, man.
Take care of your lovely daughter, and thank you for the opportunity to share these thoughts.
Love always, brother.
Love back at you, Jake.
Be cool, man.
You too. Bye-bye.